What's up, Granite United I-Campus? I'm excited to be with you here today. My name is Pastor Matt McCain. I'm the discipleship pastor here at Granite United Church, and I'm excited to be with you here. We've been in this series of Revelation, as you know, for a little while, and it's been stinking awesome. And but first, let's do a little bit of shout out. If you're here for the first time, put some firework emojis up or something like that. Maybe even type in where you're from. Type in what city and state you're from. We'd love to just get to know you a little bit, and so interact with this as much as you can throughout the message today. We're going to be talking about kind of a heavy subject today, so let's have as much fun with it as we possibly can. And like I said, we've been in this series of Revelation, which has been really great. And one thing that Pastor Miles has been talking to us about through this whole time is that Revelation isn't really, its purpose is not to scare us, it's to prepare us. It's to prepare us for, so that we can be ready for eternity, so that we can be ready for a life with Jesus. But then there's also a level of this where it's going to prepare people who aren't with Jesus, to prepare us to know what's going to happen with them here on the earth. And that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. One thing about the book of Revelation is that the Bible is given to us, it's prepared for us, it's been preserved for us so that we can't claim ignorance. God's saying, hey, here's my love letter to you. Here it is. We can't claim ignorance about anything that's written in it. You'll remember from week 1, the outline of the book of Revelation is given to us in chapter 1, verse 19. And there's going to be some the verses underneath me here. Anything that's bolded and highlighted, just type it out on the screen with you so I know you're tracking with me. But Revelation chapter 1, verse 19 says this. Jesus is talking to John, and he says, write down what you have seen, both the things that are now happening and the things that will happen. Just type that in, things that will happen. See, this outline, it helps us to navigate the book of Revelation a little bit. Chapter 1 tells us what John is seeing right then, which is the presence of Jesus. Chapters 2 and 3 are the letters to the churches of the things that are now happening. And those things are now happening even today. When John was writing them, and even today, they are now happening, because chapter 4, which we talked about last week, which is the Rapture, talks about the things that will happen. So chapters 4 through 22 are the things that will happen. We're going to spend some time in that window of time today, known as the Tribulation Period, which is specifically found in chapters 6 through 18. If you haven't read it, I would highly encourage you to read through that section. We learned last week from Pastor Brian Spicer. If you didn't get a chance to listen to last week's message, go back and listen to it. It's all about the rapture or the resurrection of the church. And it's an incredible message. It's about the imminent return of Christ. That's what the rapture is. It's imminent. It could happen at any moment. And in the timeline of end times, when we're looking at what's going to happen next, biblically speaking, the rapture is the very next thing that happens. Nothing else needs to happen to set the stage for it. The rapture could happen at any point in time. That's why we call it the imminent return of Christ. Nothing else needs to take place. And when that happens, the church, and when I say the church, I'm not talking about Granite United Church or Bay State Church. I'm talking about anybody who's given their life to Jesus, the body of believers. The Bible calls the church the body of believers. We've received Christ. We've asked him to be our Lord and Savior. We are the church. At that moment, the church gets raptured up, gets resurrected up, and we are going to be forever in God's presence. And for us, that's going to be an awesome day. It's going to be this glorious, incredible day. But today we're going to shift the perspective to the people who live on the earth after the rapture happens, the people who are left behind, if you will. And like I said, today's going to be a heavy message. It's hard to make this part of history a lighthearted message. And so when we talk through it, what I want you to do, we say this all the time at Granite, that the Bible's not just for information. It's for transformation only through application. So I want to start off with the application today. And I want you to think about this, because I want you to walk away with today a burden for somebody in your life. Somebody that you know, that you're pretty sure that right now, if the rapture were to happen today or this week, you're pretty sure that they would be left behind, that they would not be raptured up. I want you to walk away with that burden. And maybe God's laying somebody's name on your heart right now. And if you want to, you can just type their initials into the comments section below. You don't have to type their name, just type their initials in. Somebody that God's laying on your heart that you need to get a little uncomfortable with and share his message. So we're going to lean into that burden today. I want that to be the application part of today. A friend, a family member, whoever that is. Because here's the thing, sometimes when the tribulation comes up, when we hear that word, sometimes our minds go to these catastrophic images that we've seen in movies. And these images, they really entertain us because they're things that we don't normally see on a day-to-day basis. We don't see fires and all this stuff kind of happening. We see them on movies, and so when they are displayed to us, it's entertaining. And so we got to be really careful that when we read these, that we're not entertained by it in that way, but that we have a burden for somebody who could be going through that. I hope that makes sense, because this is going to be very real. Not like CGI, not green screen. What I'm about to high-level view give you is going to be some very real things that happen during this period of time. Okay, so looking at the timeline, when the rapture occurs, like I said, a lot of the population of Earth is going to disappear immediately. Anywhere between a quarter to a third of the Earth is going to disappear. That's 2 billion people, roughly. 2 to 2.6 billion people are going to immediately vanish. I want you to think about this for a second. Imagine the immediate chaos and confusion and destruction when 2 billion people immediately disappear. People driving in cars, flying in planes, helicopter pilots, trains, etc. Kings of government, presidents, prime ministers, governments collapse, nations crumble in an immediate aftermath of this rapture of 2 billion people leaving. Infrastructure goes away. People running our water and sewage and electric lines, they disappear. First responders. There's going to be an immediate chaos that we've never seen before, that the movies can't capture. And after this rapture, there's going to be a little bit of a time. I believe there's going to be a little bit of a time where some political things need to take place and settle. And there's going to be a treaty that's signed that will begin what is known as the Tribulation Period. The Tribulation Period is a 7-year period of judgment, of God's judgment on the earth. And this judgment is pictured in the Bible as broken up into kind of 3 categories of 7 seals. And I'm not talking about the mammals that swim in the ocean. It's like seals on the back of a letter. You break a seal to open it. Seals, trumpets, and bowls. Okay? You can also think of the timeline of the tribulation in 3 sections. The first section being the tribulation. Then there's a midpoint at 3.5 years. So the tribulation starts. Then 3.5 years later, a lot of things take place. And that's called the mid-trib. And then there's the second 3.5 years, which is known as the Great Tribulation. All right, so we're going to kind of do a high-level view of looking over all of these things. So the seal and the trumpet judgments occur primarily before the midpoint of the tribulation. And these judgments bring incredible destruction on the planet. During these judgments, literally, not figuratively, not symbolically, literally, 1/3 of the earth is going to be completely destroyed. There's going to be global earthquakes. Literally, every mountain on the planet is going to crumble. And all the islands of the world will be moved. The sun, the moon, and the stars, they're going to lose 1/3 of their light, whether that's just dimming or whether we add 1/3 of darkness to our current world. I don't know, but there's going to be 1/3 less light than what we currently have. Most of the water sources are also going to be contaminated. And I know this sounds crazy, but I promise you, I'm not making any of this up. We can read about it in Revelation chapter 6, verses 12 to 14. John is writing, he says, I watched as the Lamb broke the 6th seal, and there was what? Right below, a great earthquake. The sun became as dark as black cloth, and the moon became as red as blood. Verse 13, then the stars of the sky fell to the earth like green figs falling from a tree shaken by a strong wind. I think of that verse like this. I look out in my backyard, I got trees. It's fall season right now. When the wind blows and those leaves just fall, it looks like rain. That's what we're talking about here. That's how fast this meteor shower is talking about. Verse 14, the sky was rolled up like a scroll. And what does it say? All of the mountains and the islands were what? Moved from their places. Another way you can define that is to say removed from their places. In other words, when we look around, there's not going to be any white mountains. There's no Mount Washington, no Himalayas, no Pyrenees, no Rocky Mountains. The landscape is going to be flat. And all this is happening within the first 1 to 3 years of tribulation. And just to give you a picture of how people respond to this, you can see their response in verse 15. It says this, then who? Everyone. And that word everyone means exactly what you think it means. It means everyone. Then everyone, the kings of the earth, the rulers, the generals, the wealthy, the powerful, and even the slave and free persons all hid themselves in caves and among the rocks of the mountains. And they cried to the mountains and the rocks. They cried out to us. What did they cry out? Fall on us. Fall on us and hide us from the face of the one who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. People are running scared at this point. Mountains are falling all around them. They're begging for one of them to fall on them because dying is desired above living in these circumstances right now. We then come to the 7 trumpet judgments, and these include things like hail and massive fires. So if it's already not bad enough, guess what? There's more judgments coming. Hail, massive fires, some seas are going to actually turn to literal blood, and many more water supplies are going to get contaminated. There's going to be plagues of locusts. There's going to be more war. There's going to be more famine. This is why when you read throughout Scripture from the beginning to the end, you'll see this phrase, the dreadful day of the Lord. That's what it's talking about this period of time. The other thing that's going to happen on a more of a political scale, so that's a lot of physical stuff to the earth. It's going to be very difficult to live, very difficult to breathe. During this, we also have a political movement going on where we see the rise of somebody known as the Antichrist. He will become known as the Antichrist at the mid-trib point. He's going to be a military guy. He's going to start trying to bring stability to a very chaotic and unstable world. And guess what? People are going to love him. They're going to adore him. They're going to look to him as, man, he is the guy that saved us from this. At this 3.5-year mark, this mid-trib point, halfway through, there's several things that are going to take place, and there's going to be this incredible shift in oppression. The second half, like I mentioned earlier, it's known as the Great Tribulation. And it's at this midpoint time that Satan fully indwells this person who now becomes known as the Antichrist. Look with me in chapter 13, verses 4. It says this, they, being people, they worshiped the dragon. Anytime you see the word dragon in Revelation, it's talking about Satan. They worshiped the dragon for giving the beast. And again, the word beast here means the man, the Antichrist. They worshiped the dragon for giving the beast, the Antichrist, such power, and they also worshiped the beast. So they not just worshiped Satan, but because they worshiped the beast, they worshiped Satan. Because they worshiped the Antichrist. They loved him so much, they worshiped him. And they say things like this, who's as great as this beast? They exclaim. Who is able to fight against him? Verse 5, then the beast was allowed to speak great blasphemies against God. And he was what? Given authority. He was given authority by Satan to do whatever he wanted for 42 months, for 3.5 years. See, when Satan indwells the Antichrist, Satan's purpose is always the same, to try to stamp out Jesus, to stamp out the word of God. And so he's going to use this person to try to do that. We know he fails, but that's his goal. We also see the rise of this other person who's going to be known as the false prophet. He's going to be like this religious leader of the world. And he's going to demand that everyone worships this Antichrist. In fact, they're even going to build a statue in God's temple so that people can come and worship him. There's going to also be a mark that's placed on everyone as they swear allegiance to the Antichrist. And this mark, we've talked a little bit about this mark. You've heard Pastor talk about like this season that we're in with COVID and vaccination cards and mandates, that we are being conditioned mentally and socially to be more accepting of when this time comes. I'm not saying the vaccine is the mark. It's certainly not. But there will be a time whenever we become very accepting of a mark. And it's not going to be up for debate. It's not going to be something that you see on Fox News and CNN, because there won't be any Fox and CNN at this time that's debating it. Everybody's going to jump in line for this. Why? Because chapter 13, verse 16 says this. He required everyone, again, that word everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to be given a mark on the right hand or the forehead. Verse 17, and no one could buy or sell anything without that mark. There's no question. You have to do that. In order to live any type of a lifestyle, you have to get this. There's not going to be a debate. It's going to be, you're going to do it, and people are going to line up for it. And they're going to know exactly why they're lining up for it. In the timeline, we still have the Great Tribulation now, the second 3.5 years, where the Antichrist then now sets up his dominion on the earth. He's in full power now. He's been given total power. The world is worshiping him. They've taken a mark to embrace him. They celebrate him. And so now he has full reign. And so the earth is going to go through 7 more judgments known as the bowl judgments. And here's some things that are going to happen physically on the earth. More of the earth will be destroyed. more of the water supply. In fact, by the end of it, all of the water supply will be completely contaminated, unable to drink. Most of it will be filled with blood. It will be completely contaminated. Life is going to be physically incredibly more difficult to even live, even to breathe. The trees are going to be gone. It's going to be just hard to breathe during this time. Economically, the government's going to be at this point a one world government and a one world religion. There's going to be no voting, no freedoms, no voice. Most people are going to be in hiding. There's going to be little housing and zero security. Spiritually, the world will be forced to worship one man, and to oppose that man will mean death. There's a lot going on. Aren't you glad you signed up for church today? It's so much stuff going on that it really makes up 13 chapters that cover this 7-year period in the book of Revelation. But here's some things. Here's the great news. And we're going to talk a little bit about this next week, is that next week you'll see that there's going to be a definitive end to this. It is a 7 years. It's marked with a definitive beginning. It will have a definitive end to it. At the end of this 7 years, guess what happens? Jesus comes back with his army, which is us. He comes back and we fight this final battle of Armageddon. It's not really much of a battle at all, but the end of the story is, guess what? We win. And that's the great news. This tribulation period, this judgment period has to happen. And then at the end of it, Jesus comes back and sets up his 1,000-year reign on earth. And this was, like I said, it's a high-level view of the tribulation. And I said it's heavy. And I wanted you to have a burden of somebody in your heart. It's hard to convey this in a light way, but there is some more good news with this. Number one is this, that we, the church, the people who believe in Jesus, who have invited Christ into our life, guess what? We're not going to be here. We're not going to experience any of this. The rapture is going to come and we're going to be taken up. We're going to be caught up. And so we don't get to experience any of this that goes on. Number two is this, that God's not absent. He's still willing that none should perish. That's his characteristic. That's who he is from start to finish, even in this tribulation period. In Revelation chapter 11, it speaks of two witnesses who stand up and who boldly proclaim God's truth. And people all around are going to hear them and they're going to respond to them. And there will be people who give their life to Jesus during this tribulation time. I get it. And a lot of this seems far-fetched. But I promise you that someday all of this is going to happen. It really is. It's not a movie. It's not just something that somebody wrote down. This is really going to happen. And it's an important question to ask here, because you may be thinking, if I'm not going to be here, is this really that important? And the answer is yes. It really is important. Why? Well, one, because we need to study God's word. God preserved his word for us for thousands of years so that we could have it, not to sit on a shelf, but so that we could read it and study it and understand it. So we need to do that just for that reason. But here's this. Think about this. In the Old Testament, there's a ton of prophecies about the coming Messiah. Ton of prophecies about him. Can you imagine somebody being me, standing up in front of a people and saying, hey, guess what? At some point in the future, there's going to be a baby that's born in Bethlehem. He's going to be born of a virgin. Literally, the stars are going to line up to point the way to him. Could you imagine? And there's going to be a messenger that even goes before him. Could you imagine somebody standing up and saying that and people in the audience going, yeah, but that's going to happen. That's not really that important for me right now. That has nothing to do with my life. And that's about Jesus coming the first time. But here's the thing, the people that knew the scripture, they knew to look for the signs so that whenever Jesus did come, they could grab their friends and their families and say, hey, this is him. This is him. This is the guy we've been talking about. This is the guy mom and dad's been telling us about, who we've been praying about. This is the Messiah. And it's the same way with studying this part of prophecy of end times, is that we need to be well equipped with God's word to know what to look for to see that God is coming back again. And we need to be able to share that with people so that people will know as well. Because the same Bible that said Jesus would come the first time, guess what? He did. That same Bible also tells us that all of these things that I just talked about, they're going to happen. And it's going to. It may seem far-fetched. It may even sound crazy. I promise you it's going to happen. Hopefully you won't be here when it takes place. I'm not going to be. Hopefully you won't be here when that takes place. But the thing is, someone you love will. Those initials that you wrote earlier, that person you have in your mind, they very well may be here for at least the start of this. knowing what we know today, knowing how bad things are going to get, we have a burden. We have a responsibility to get uncomfortable. Well, I don't like conflict. I don't like uncomfortable conversations. Knowing what we know, we have a responsibility to fight through that uncomfortableness, that fear, that, man, I wonder if it's going to ruin the relationship. All of those things take place. I get it. But we have a responsibility to fight through that uncomfortableness, and to share the gospel message. The message that Jesus did love us. He does love us. God loves his world so much that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him would have everlasting life. That's what's promised to us. And the first question you need to ask yourself is, do you know that you know that you know that you know? There's no question, shadow of a doubt, that if the rapture were to occur today, that you would be taken up to be in the presence of the Lord? Or is there a sliver of doubt that you might be left behind? So as much as this burden is on you to share this message with other people, there's also a burden for you to make sure that you know. Because I believe that we're going to be really surprised at who is in heaven and who's not in heaven. And I want to make sure that you're in heaven with us. So I want to ask you right now, church, to bow your head and close your eyes in a word of prayer. And I want you to do some business with the Lord right now. And if this is you and you want to say, man, I've been going to church, I've been doing certain things, I feel like I've been doing the right things, but I want to know that I know that I know that I'm going to be in the presence of the Lord when he comes and takes his church. I want you to say a prayer like this with me. Dear Lord, I come to you right now, and I'm asking you to forgive me of my sins. I don't necessarily understand everything that this pastor's talking about, but I do know that you love me. I know you sent your son to die on the cross for me, and I believe that he rose again for me. And so to the best of my ability, God, I'm putting my faith and trust in you, and I'm inviting you into my life. Now, church, if that's you today and you prayed that prayer or something very similar to that, I want to say welcome to the family, because that's awesome. If you would do something for me, just put a little hand emoji down there, just like a raised hand, just letting one of our leaders know, and we'll reach out to you, and we want to send you a Bible. We want to get you some information about the decision you just made, because you just made the most eternity-changing decision you could ever make. Thank you for being here today. We hope you enjoyed the message, and we hope you tune in next week. Have a great day.